So I say we just get into it. How does everyone feel about that?
Let's do it, Chris.
Cool. And so I feel like this idea has been in my head for a long time, and it finally just like popped out in a way that was clear. And the place where it started, to be honest, is I was doing a keynote for a very large company. We're kicking off a project, got their whole marketing team in. They're doing a lot of ABM right now. I think with a lot of marketers, they share the same thing, which is that they are doing ABM, they are following the best practices in the book, and they're not necessarily getting the result that they expected. And I continue to have this thought that is now more clear, which is the idea of ABM as a concept is basically, it's been around forever. The idea is that you define your ICP, you figure out what are the highest priority accounts. If you sell a product at a certain amount, which I would say is the cutoff is probably 100K to do true ABM, 100K ASP, or your TAM is so small, but most likely both, or you're not going to build a big business. And that's where you would actually do ABM. The thing is that most companies, because of how broken that their existing marketing demand gen function was, no matter what ASP they sell at, no matter how big their TAM is, no matter who they're targeting, they just think ABM is the answer. What I think is the answer is actually, unless you're selling to just the top 50 CPG companies in the country, if you actually have, like, let's just say you are selling to education, but higher, college, private colleges in certain states or whatever are your actual high value targets. I think that the right approach for most companies is a combination of demand, brand, and ABM. And I think that the combination if you were going to implement it, I think that the right approach to doing this type of marketing would be demand, brand, ABM. And most companies are just doing ABM and missing the other two components. The real reason that I think that is because while ABM as a concept is built on proper targeting, is basically all it is defining your target accounts. It's the execution underneath that targeting that dictates whether or not you're successful. What content you put, what channels you put it in, how you measure it, how well you understand your buyers, how well your product is positioned, what data you have, and how actions get triggered based on certain behaviors. Like, the actual execution is what matters. And I would much rather pilot and figure that out at a demand level with a lot of accounts than try and go and figure that out, which most companies jump into ABM and have no idea what tactics work. And then the tech drives their tactics. So they're stuck running display ads and sending gifts with Sendoso and sending cold emails through outreach. Like, and that's their ABM program to 50 accounts. And you wonder why they're not getting any results. And so to close out, I do on this topic believe that the approach is a three-prong. If you are a mid-market or enterprise SaaS company that's selling less than 500K ARR deals, I do believe that is the path. And so the people listening would encourage you to think about that. It is much easier to know if your demand strategy is working when you're targeting 5,000 of your tier 2 accounts than 50 of your tier 1 accounts. And so, yeah, we'll just get the conversation started that way. Maybe there's some questions flowing in, because that's a new topic that I haven't really talked about in that way before. So if there are questions, would love to cover them. We'll also put a little, sorry, I just want to put a sneak peek in here. So Sangram from, so I posted about ABM on Sunday, and just the polarization of the idea of all these marketers are doing ABM. And meanwhile, all the same marketers don't either don't measure the success of it or don't know how. And so that was the kind of polarized view that I have of what's going on right now, is all these people are doing it, but no one knows how to measure it or make it be successful. And so I posted about that, and a lot of people were like, you should have Sangram on the podcast. And so him and I are going to talk through, not about whether or not ABM is the right concept, but to talk about what are the common mishaps that people have when implementing it, right? The concept is smart, but I think people need a lot more guidance on what are the right things to do, in what order, what things do I need, what things do I really need, and how do I get it done and how do I measure it? And so stay tuned for that. That's happening in November, but let's get into the questions.
Yeah, let's bring our good friend David K on. He has a question on this topic that you're talking about, so we can keep it going. But instead of reading it, let's bring him on, and he can tell you himself, ask you himself.
Sure. Hi. Hey, Chris.
Hey,
Megan. So just want to check in. Can't you be doing brand advertising to targeted accounts too? Can't you be testing assumption? I don't know if that's what you were trying to say you couldn't do or shouldn't do, but as you were speaking just now, you were insinuating as if branding is more broad, whereas it could be targeted, no?
I think that's fair. I think it really comes down to how you define it. And so in that instance, the way that I define it would be things like a podcast, a video podcast, organic channels like LinkedIn or different things where it's not as targeted. And I would consider if you took a 2-minute video like what we're doing right now, and it was about some certain account, and I ran it in an ad to the CMO of the account that it was about, that I would consider that an ABM play, not a brand play, despite how you can see how they could be considered both depending on how you measure it. And so if it's like, if I'm going after my top 50, no matter how I'm measuring it and no matter what I'm doing, I just am going to define that as ABM. But I see your point as well. I think that this is, it could go either way, to be honest.
I mean, certainly creating content that could be consumed by a wider audience is going to happen, right? Sure. But the money you spend putting wood behind that content arrow, if you excuse the bad, awkward phrasing. So I'm going to target these accounts, whatever it might be. Back in my history, I worked at a company that had 1,890 accounts worldwide. That was it. Any demand generation I did outside of that didn't count for me. So I started getting very good at tuning my attack to only focus on those. However, I had broad content pieces. It's just that I was only paying for what went to those people, or to those accounts. So
yeah, I think I have a way to explain this that might be clear. Is the idea like, let's pretend that I am going after hospitals in the U.S. Okay. ABM would be anything that I'm doing to the top 50 ER trauma centers with the most hospital beds. And so anything around that, I look at this more as from a targeting component, like whether you're doing quote unquote ABM or demand, like the execution underneath it is not that different. Right. And so top 50 is my ABM targeting. And then I have a demand layer, which is going after my silver, which would be, the top 2,000 hospitals. And then brand would be more after the persona, regardless of the account firmographics potentially. And so I think it would just be adding, loosening up the targeting as you go up the chain.
So you're thinking of ABM as being really less than 100 accounts? Is that kind of what's in your story, so to speak, in your mind, that you're thinking about ABM as it's a smaller number rather than up to 1,000 or 2,000 accounts? Is that what you're? I
mean, if you're doing, it depends if you're trying to do one-to-one, one-to-many, and what your ACV is and what makes sense. But like, if you're targeting 1,000 accounts, I think that's demand gen, not account-based marketing. Like, yes, you're using company firmographics for targeting, but
well, it depends on the scale of the company. But I can see what you mean, right?
Yeah.
So this was at I was at CA, and there was 450 sales reps for North America. So 2,000 accounts was just enough to keep them busy. But I see what you're trying to say. So I also don't want to take up all the airtime here. There's probably lots of other questions.
No, appreciate the question, because if
this
you ask
notion
a
of
lot
scale
of people,
is really kind of, I think that's something that people don't talk about, that you're trying to bring into the conversation here.
Great question. Got me thinking a little bit. I'm sure it got other people thinking. So appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
We've got Ty actually sent in a question, and he made a comment here around ABM. He needs an acronym legend for the meeting. Ty, why don't we bring you on, because you sent in a question.
Sure.
And if you want to expand on this comment that you made related to ABM and some of the connections you've seen in tactics, and then we can also segue into the one you sent in before.
I mean, I don't remember it verbatim, but as I'm learning
First
more.
First off, Ty, is this your first time here?
No, it's my second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Happy to have you. Okay,
Thank
go
you.
ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. So as I'm learning more about ABM, most of the tactics that I see are things that we've already utilized in customer success for years successfully.
Mm-hmm.
It's like just a different lens, a different scale. I'm just kind of curious what crossover lessons we might be able to utilize, what things customer success might be able to bring to the table for people who are using ABM that might be, cross-functional. Yeah.
I mean, the first thing is that like the category of technology is new, but like none of this stuff is new. I was on a podcast earlier. I think I'll share it here with the people because I think it's interesting. Is like in 2015, before I had ever heard of ABM or ABM tech, inside of Salesforce, we had our gold top 50 account list, and then we had our silvers, and then we had our bronze. Right. And so we were doing that stuff. And I was for the top 50, I was getting together with the field sales rep that had the 2 gold accounts. And we were trying to figure out how to get into those 2 gold accounts. And one of them was in a contract with our competitor. So it only was down to 1. And we were thinking about what we could do with those people, certain things to get a meeting. We were doing all of those things at that time as well. You could run account-based targeting on Facebook. So anyone that they worked at, Seattle Children's Hospital inside of Facebook, you could target those people. And I was running ABM in 2015, 16 across the top 50 accounts to specific at certain job titles, delivering them information because these are $1 million plus ARR accounts for us. And then the CMO of the company comes back and said, "Hey, I was just at HubSpot's inbound conference and heard about this new thing called ABM." And I was like, "Hey, Lise, guess what? We're already doing it, but I'll take the demo anyway." And I take the demo. And basically, it's just a way to push out display ads. And I'm like, Lise, we have right here, we're pushing $50,000 a month through Facebook and it's working. Do we really want to spend $4,000 in this tech and have to put $10,000 of our ads and move that money away from Facebook that's working and go and run display ads, which none of us believe in? And so I think that the interesting take home, and I know that I'm not getting to your question, but I swear we'll get to it eventually, is the idea that like, you can do everything that's related to ABM without an ABM vendor. It's literally more on the mindset and the effort because all the tactics can be done without it. And so to get on your question, Megan, you might be easier to better to answer this one than me. What are the things that we can do take from CS to move into to ABM? Like the one that comes top of mind for me is I think that like some of the more progressive CS companies are creating really great content. And another thing that I think is really interesting is that it's fascinating that most customer success organizations and like developed organizations have way more knowledge about their customers than marketers. Like I think that's probably the number one take home for everyone listening here. And I was in that same keynote, I was just absolutely fascinated when I was talking, and I was like, how do you expect to be able to do anything ABM related when you haven't immersed yourself in the world of your buyer, that you don't know who are the most 10 influential people that are talking to that buyer and what their points of view are and what the psychographic, setup for a person that wants to buy your product versus doesn't. And what are all the things that they need to know? And so I find it very fascinating, but I think that's one that's glaringly obvious is like why don't marketers have that level of understanding about customers that customer success people do? Because if they did, they would be able to do way better marketing.
Yeah, I can chime in. I think, yeah, there's, I would say, I think when, customer success is done really, really well, you get to a point in the customer life cycle that I like to call advocacy, where your customer they are an evangelist of your company, your product, your service, right? They get so much value. They've had such a great experience that you don't need to ask them to be a reference or leave a review. They are actively talking about, what you do and the value that you bring. And they often are going to be connected to other decision makers at other prospective accounts that you want to bring on. And so, things like having customer advisory boards or focus groups, really investing in, obviously table stakes is like delivering value, following through on your promises, meeting their expectations, but how do you surprise and delight and go above and beyond to convert a good, happy customer to that evangelist? I think that's really the secret, and how can you leverage that effectively so that they're getting that, so that your other prospective customers that aren't with you yet are hearing from that person and that individual. So whether that's through content creation, through having them come to your event. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can execute against that, but I think that's what I would add as sort of the primary addition, and completely reinforcing what Chris said, like just educating yourself and knowing what your customer is dealing with is key, and it can be something that's easily skipped over. But it's really hard to get that advocacy and that evangelism piece right. But if you do, your customers effectively will sell for you, and that can be really, really powerful. That's when you get your network effect.
Yep, and that's when we talk about the whole word of mouth thing. I put it very nicely that I think for people to understand is when you create word of mouth in the market, and then people tell other people, you have $0 customer acquisition costs. That is the key. Like over time, your overall cost efficiency of acquired customers will hit a bottom where there's nowhere else to go if you're running paid or blah, 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 blah. And from there, the only way to lower it is to deliver a good product. And that's where you get to like the Salesforce type of, like very large tech companies continue to grow. They could do, and it's interesting because they could waste all their money on sales, and they could throw their $50 million marketing budget directly in the trash and still feed off of that. Over time, that will catch up with them, but it will take decades. And so it's when you try and model your go-to-market model off of a company like that has that effect that you don't have when you're 2 million ARR, it's just I just think is a fundamental mistake. And so, yeah, I'm happy to kind of pivot here. We have a couple other topics in the agenda that were sort of top of mind for me. The next one, or do you have a question? You want to go?
No, go for it. You got
Okay.
there's a few questions around like how to ramp and like how to tackle your first 90 days. There's a few that came in on that.
Okay.
I think that's a great topic to jump into.
Yeah.
Do you got one of those?
I do have it on the agenda. If someone is on the Zoom and like has that specific question, we can go back and forth, or I can just cover it generally, whichever one we want.
Yeah, I think is Cameron here? Yes, he is. Cameron, you want to come on?
What's up?
What's up?
How are you guys?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Good.
Good to have you here. Do you want to give us a little background? I mean, obviously the thesis is what do you do in the first 90 days, but maybe a little bit more info so I can help you more.
Yeah, so I hear you talk about some of these things a lot, but I wanted to hear your take on really what you would do if you had a clean slate at a company. It's speaking in general terms, there's a parent company above, and this is a startup within it. So they have a little bit of a sales operation going, and me and one other marketer have been brought on to start the inbound engine and kind of supplement the sales and build out essentially the marketing department.
Mm-hmm.
No one in the organization has a huge marketing expertise, but they're very open-minded and really anything is possible. So our take is starting on search ads and kind of getting the website going. But I wanted to kind of see what you thought on how do you build the foundation for content and demand generation in a complex products kind of situation.
Mm-hmm. I have 4 key questions for you, and then anyone that's listening to this is going through the same thing could almost ask themselves the same questions. How much does the product cost?
It depends. So it's based on pallet volume. So it's kind of a software supply chain as a service.
Mm-hmm.
So
Just on average, just give me a 25K, 100K, million, 6K. Like how
I'd
much
say
do you-
between you could get a 10K client, you could also get a 50K or 500K client for ARR.
Okay.
But generally be like 25 to 100 range.
Yep. Cool. This is the sweet spot that I like to call mid-market SaaS that has a couple enterprise customers, but this is the play because they can move with a velocity that's similar to SMB if you do the marketing well, and you also get way more revenue from every customer. I just really like this. Just really like this space. Okay. And then what department or persona are you selling into?
So we really don't even know yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's that much of a kind of Wild West situation where
It sounds like supply chain ops or something like that.
it could be supply chain ops. It could be B2B, like B2B e-commerce type thing. It could be B2C, more of the kind of trendy e-commerce owners of e-commerce companies. So really there's a huge variation. We kind of want to crack the e-commerce market, but most of the clients right now are industrial style companies.
Cool. And then you said there's 2 people on the team, you and someone else. What are the like top 2, or let's say collectively between both of you, the top 4 strengths of what you all can do?
So top 4 collectively, I would say Google Ads. So search, display, search engine marketing, website design and development. I'd say LinkedIn, and then mostly I would say media buying, web design, that kind of thing is our strength. And then we know how to kind of do a little bit of everything.
Cool. So I think you know where I'm going with this one on this. Do you?
I have an idea. I just wanted to see if what you'd say.
So I've not the exact same situation, lower price product, different like company situation without the parent company and different things like that. But small company thought they knew who they were selling to, but wasn't really sure. I've been there as one of the couple marketers. The first thing that you need to do, and you're going to have to figure out how to navigate this politically and organizationally, but you need to go and talk to 50 people in those different segments and figure out who actually needs the product. Otherwise, you're going to spin your wheels, and I really do think that is a time well spent to understand where does the product actually fit? What is the message that actually resonates? Can I validate this? So if you need to, the easiest place to start is go to talk to existing customers and then understand, if those 5 they all fit in this little same bucket and they all say the same things, how many other accounts are like them? And then you can start to build, but you need to figure out your targeting and ICP first. A lot of companies will try to use media dollars to figure that out. I think that it can often lead you in the wrong directions. I see a lot of companies that will be like, we're going to target, healthcare industry, and then this industry, and then this industry, and then this persona, and then do this. And then based on the click-through rate, we're going to decide which industry is the best to go after. And there are so many other dynamics that would drive the click-through rate from 0.4% to 0.9%. And you're going to make a true strategic business decision based on a 0.5% difference in click-through rate. And so I would not do that. Like I would go and talk to people. I would have it validated. I would have a deep understanding about what they care about. All those things are going to be great. You could chalk it together by doing a podcast and having those people on your podcast, and you can get a 2-for-1 of market research and content creation, and networking and understanding. So I would recommend that. So let's just pretend. I would say I would give it 30 days to go and understand your customers and put together a couple hypotheses about who is the best buyer and what are the messages that resonate. Depending on whether or not you have the overall foundation going on from there, would be like a website that's optimized. A basic, do not over engineer the tech stack at this point, like a basic marketing automation CRM. If the parent company might already be using like a larger stack like Salesforce or something, Depending on that, just like I would, for companies of this size, I would just say HubSpot full stack. And then you have your, analytics, pipeline tracking, you can build dashboards, all those different things. And then the next thing would be like, is there a way that I can get efficacy? So let's just pretend the next foundation, like setting up the tech, building the website conversion optimization, like refreshing the messaging based on what you learned and those different things. And now you're at day 60. At day 60, I'm launching campaigns for efficacy, not efficiency. I'm trying to figure out what are the channels that are going to give me something. And so figure out how much money you would need to figure that out. You seem like you know how to, do media. And so I would start with, if there's existing search demand, you'll know how to figure that out. If there's existing bottom of the funnel search demand, then I would target that. So, supply chain software for e-commerce, like would probably be a good keyword to buy and drive them in. E-commerce supply chain, not so much of a good keyword, a trap. And so, those things, but so I would take whatever the core channels are. I would start with Google and LinkedIn, and then decide if you can get to those people on Facebook. It's probably only, without another layer of tools, it's probably only a retargeting play on Facebook and Instagram. And over those next 30 days, I'm looking for what are the channels that could give me something. And then from there, I'm going to follow the trail to figure out how do I make that more efficient or scalable over time. And so that's kind of like a back of the napkin 90-day plan, with the idea of at day 90, I have some idea of exactly who I'm selling to. Hopefully we have, at your ACV, hopefully you either have some organic demand, like the company's too early. So your inbound organic flow could be 0 right now, which is scary because you don't even know that the message validates. Like, I like going into companies at a place where they already have 10, 20, 50 leads when they're doing nothing, or when they're advertising. It's a complete waste of money and it's not doing anything. But I know that, their buyers find their website and think that it's a good idea to get a demo, because that part of the process is validated. And then all I need to do is figure out how I get more people that are in the ICP educated and on the website to go through that flow. And so is there any existing demand? 1, 2, 3, 10 demo requests a month or something?
Not much. I would say probably one inbound lead every 2 weeks, starting from 0 followers on LinkedIn. And part of the reason why they wanted to kind of start a marketing initiative is to get that feedback, maybe through media. So that's interesting that you said that. I think that's a really good idea, is going to talking to existing actual customers.
I'll tell you a story, and it's not one where I was doing something good. It was when I made a big mistake. Is I went into that company and basically like got, because of the way that the company was structured and how much money they raised and what the mindset was in those people. And it's honestly my fault for not vetting that up front. Got pushed 100% into performance marketing, did none of those different things. And targeted the people that they told me to target and drove them hundreds of leads at very low costs. And 3 months later, and we closed like one deal at $5,000 ARR, and it was a complete waste of time and money for like 3 or 4 months. And then what did I do? I went and did what I should have done initially, which is I went and talked to 10 customers at each different segment, customers and prospects. And what did I find? That there was actually a subset of the actual market that we were going after that was 20% of the TAM, that was who actually wanted the product and the ones that were getting value from it. And I would go and visit different people, and these people over here would be incredibly happy with their product, and they would tell me what it was doing for them. And our messaging did not reflect that, because they were messaging at the other persona that had the larger TAM. And then I would go and talk to those 4 customers that we had out of like hundreds of customers. We had 4 in this segment, and that's what sales wanted to go after because it was the largest opportunity. And I went and talked to them, and there was 4 of them. They didn't care about the product. They were using it because one of our investors like knew the people that owned that line of facilities, and the stuff sat like in the corner and never got used. And when you bring that back and you're like, I think we should go after, I know that this addressable market is smaller. I know it might hurt your, next conversation with investors when we go to raise a Series B. But if we want to, if we want to sell this product, we should follow the people that are getting the most value from it, or we need a new product. And so that was like, I'll never forget that time, and I will never make that mistake again. And I will try to, as much as I can, for all the people listening or on this Zoom, have them never make that mistake, because it is just, it's a fundamental marketing thing that a lot of people just pass by and assume. And every single company that I've been at, when I've done that, I've learned something critical that nobody else in the company understood. $30 million ARR company, I go in, everyone's thinking about a certain thing this way. Like we go in, oh, like the children's hospital segment is our best segment, blah, 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 blah. And then you go and visit them, and you're like, it might have been 5 years ago, but they're starting to use this other product because we haven't paid attention to them for the last 4 years. And so I think it's incredibly fundamental and incredibly important to go through that process yourself.
That was a great
Cool.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really good
thank you.
question. Hope it was helpful, man.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Good
Thank
luck.
you.
If you, depending on how you look at it, especially with the zero inbound flow, it can be a very huge opportunity, right? Because the baseline's essentially 0. So if you just move it to 10, you've just almost infinitely increased the results that they were getting. So big opportunity for you.
Yeah, I'm excited.
We actually have another, what would you do in your first 90-day question, but a different scenario, from our good friend Alex, that's been bringing the good questions.
Right
every
on.
week.
Yeah, has been really good questions.
Let's bring him back on. I know you had a couple, but why don't you start with your 90-day, and then we can tackle your other one.
For sure. Hey, Megan. Hey, Chris. Hey, everyone.
Hey.
So this one is in the case of a B2B SaaS company. I would say more SMB. So let's call it like around the 5 to 10K ACV range.
Mm-hmm.
Massive growth. So above 50% year over year revenue growth, and mostly driven by inbound marketing. And so the marketing team is already very, very well respected. So you're a new growth marketer, established company, 5 other growth marketers. You're not competing for the same market per se, because you're all in charge of different segments. And the segments in this particular market are based on firmographics like employee size. So certain companies who are in the industry and employee size, 1 to 10, there's a growth marketer solely in charge of that segment, et cetera, et cetera. So first 90 days with all of that information, what would you do as call it the 6th growth marketer joining the team?
I mean, I don't think the first step would be that much different.
Right.
And so the first 30 days are about the same. I find it based on employee size, and I go through this. And if I go and I talk to the seed company, the Series A, the Series C, and then the profitable $500 million company, they all have different challenges. They're all completely different. And so just by the variable of employee size, I think you do want to narrow in on what's really key important. And I noticed that as I focus my messaging more and more, like, it works way better. So I would definitely encourage you to do that. And then from there, like, because the company's already, having success, I would start to fall, like, you're gonna want to inject your own ideas and run your own experiments. But the first step would be to go and talk to their 5 people and figure out what they're doing that's working the best.
Right.
And then you have to just use your own, intuition to understand and make a decision about whether that is truly the best thing to do or not. And it's different from the answer before, because this company's moving, right? And so they have existing data, they have a lot of people, they have a lot of resources, what's working, you have true market traction. And so I think it's more pour gas on the fire. Now, the thing that I would do first is I would run Facebook ads. It's just really hard to target based on employee size without a tool like metadata. And even then, like, I just don't think that's the right use case. 5 to 10K ACV, LinkedIn's out. And so LinkedIn is not an option. I'm imagining that your SEM is all under one, because it's not, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to differentiate SEM by employee size, or to have 5 different marketers running paid search just based on that one variable. So I imagine search is done. And And so when you look at it, I think it's more about it's how do you continue to do what's working for certain that segment, and then it's almost how do you augment the resources that are covering the other things. Like, does it make sense for you to have a podcast for the 100 to 250 employee size segment? Like, I don't think so, but I could be wrong. And so it kind of, I'm not sure I'm being helpful here because it actually feels quite limiting. It's just it's not usually what situation I'm in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what's on your mind? I would be interested about how you want to approach it.
It's a little bit of that for sure. So it's definitely go speak to the other growth marketers, figure out what's going well. To your point, you kind of hit it right on the head. LinkedIn is off the table. SEM, particularly through search, off the table. We're talking $150 CPCs. So that's off the table. A lot of great content already being pushed out.
I got a good one for you, actually.
Yeah.
Is that I would find the opening or tactic that's not being used at the company right now, and I would do that.
You know what? Podcasts are under leveraged. They're
podcast community.
Yeah.
Like those are some of the things where I think that, and because like if you do that well, you end up having the entire, you're not in your segment, you're in all of it. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's another interesting thing is to look at the company's not doing one of the things that we talk about here, or one of the things that you've seen work really well. And that can be the thing that you go in and add it to the layer. It also, like from a personal standpoint, kind of like elevates you because you're impacting all of it. The challenge is making sure that it helps you get to your specific goals.
That's right.
In any of these things, like before I was, doing certain things at other companies, I was like, I need to hit my goals first. And my goal was to hit whatever my goals were in the first 10 days, or have it be, get to a place where it was so easy. So most of my mind share was focused on what is the next thing, because that becomes the opportunity for career progression. It's the same. I give the advice to SDRs all the time. It's like, figure out how to get to whatever your activity or, meeting goal is as quickly as possible, and then start doing LinkedIn, and then start doing those things. Because then over time, if you're the SDR, like I know that people listening here know certain SDRs that have over a certain period of time gone from a nobody to 20,000 LinkedIn followers. And that person has a lot of leverage now.
Yeah.
Has more leverage over their company than the company probably appreciates. And so I think that's and I was doing a talk with 15 salespeople on Monday. And I was like, look, I know that you're here right now, and I know that your company's sponsoring me to come and talk to you right now, but like, in 4 years, you're going to wish that you did this, because you might not want to work here forever. And it's much better if you have a lot of leverage going into whatever you want to do next versus not. And so I'm not sure how I got there, but those are some of the ideas I would to recap, I would find a tactic. I think that you were getting to that too, which is I think on the right track.
Cool. Thanks. Different beast for sure. Much further advanced company.
For sure, man. That's I'd be interested to kind of have you join and talk through the journey with me, because it's a space where I don't have a ton of experience in that. So would love to learn from you there.
Happy to do it.
You had your second question, Alex. You want to squeeze it in before we move on?
Okay. This one is not necessarily 90 days though. I don't know if you still want me to ask it. It's more about
yeah. Go
Okay.
for it.
Okay. So this is flip the switch now. So now we're going back 3 rounds of financing, still B2B SaaS. We're going up market. So now it's mid-market, kind of, you have a few customers in a few segments who are, $1 million, $500,000 ACVs, but mostly $40,000, $50,000 ACVs.
Mm-hmm.
Still great growth, Series A. But if you were given $250K, we'll say, I'm in Canada, but we can say US, to put towards annual earnings, whether that's a combination of salary, bonus, commission, contractor fees, you name it. How would you build your team? Your growth team?
So like I'm, leading the growth team, and I have to decide.
That's right. You are the sole marketing leader, and you're given budget. Beyond your media budget, it's $250K. build your team, build your talent, and it could be a combination of in-house and outsourced. But that's sort of the budget. So yeah, you have full freedom on that.
This is a good one, because the 250 is sort of limiting, right? And so, including like tech, or do you assume that all that stuff's already in here? Nothing.
Assume that's all in there. This is truly like
True, like head count,
like
yeah,
salaries,
not ads, not that stuff.
No, that's a separate line item. This is just count.
I would outsource.
If it helps, not New York or San Francisco costs.
So when I look at this, I think about the first, and anyone that's trying to do this, you have to think about what your role is going to be. With that limited budget, you're going to have to own a real role inside of that team. And so when I look at myself, my role is going to be media and content. And so that's the way that I'm doing it. Everyone else will be able to identify their own strengths and then put themselves on that part of the team. Then I'm going to get a freelance or outsourced designer and videographer. And let's just pretend that all in on an hourly basis is like 40K, because they're not full time. We're not using them all the time. And so let's just pretend that's 40K. The next thing I'm probably going to do is hire a product marketer. And that's probably one that's different for other people. But the reason is because, I honestly just think that there's people that are much better at that specific thing than me. And that person is typically versatile. But they skew more on the messaging, positioning, customer research side than where my true value lies, which is more in the executional side once the strategy is locked in. So I'm going to hire someone else that I trust to do that. Product marketer, you tell me, but I'm thinking, depending on seniority, 100 to 150, I think is a fair place. So, and that would give me, let's just say 100 left.
Tough.
I would say the creative. I'm not sure really what pops into my mind. I guess if I was going to have the next one, it would probably be someone to run the media so that I could really focus on the customer.
Gotcha.
And so if you break down my core team, we added some interesting levels here with the salaries and the ability to outsource and different things like that. But my core team is architect, creative, distributor, and what's the last one? Come on, I'm forgetting it right now off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but
the ops person, maybe the marketing ops person.
My feeling is it's almost too early. If you only have 3 or 4 people, that marketing ops doesn't make the cut in my view. I think that marketing ops gets layered on at 6 to 8. And so, but I think that gives you a good piece. So somebody that understands customers deeply, somebody that orchestrates the overall strategy. That person can be the same person. Somebody that can make creative for the different distribution channels. So creative, and then and then someone that can distribute the content.
Okay.
And so I've put because I've done this role by myself before, I've put myself in a place where I could technically do all of them. And so my real job is to figure out where does my core strength lie, and where can I have someone else on the team do it?
Okay.
How would you answer it? It's nice. We're going now. It's live open or AMA to Alex.
Yeah. I think I would do something very similar. I think the product marketer is one. If you don't have it at that level of company, I think it's once you have it and you realize how important it is, because there are some people who are kind of wired to do that. For me, I'm similar to you, Chris, the positioning, getting really nerdy about it should be this word versus this word. It's I don't know.
I respect how important it is. And I also respect that there are people that are far more capable and enjoy it more than me.
Yeah.
And I would much rather come in with someone that's already had that done and validated in the market. And now I can put gasoline on the fire. That's my job. Yeah.
It's a critical role, and it is more expensive. But yeah, so product marketer, creative for sure. If you can get video and graphics, you're in a pretty good spot. The last one I would hire would probably be, honestly, I'd get a copywriter.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably get a copywriter who can do the interviews with the SMEs if they don't have time to actually write for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and then have that copywriter double on just community management or social media.
And the one that I was forgetting was the subject matter expert.
Yeah, for sure.
which is
For the
which is
record,
critical.
Matthew called it in the comments. Good job, Matthew.
Thank you, Matthew. Can always
Oh,
count on you.
Saturday to make my
Cool. Okay, that was fun. Thanks.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, man.
Good to see you, man.
Thanks for coming, Alex, and for your good questions. We appreciate it. So, I mean, what's a demand gen live if we don't tackle Facebook advertising?
Oh my.
We've got a very specific question, but
Nice.
he doesn't appear to be on, so I can sub in for Andy and read this question to you. You ready for this?
Of course.
Would love to know how you'd position Facebook advertising for a company with very low ACV, high velocity business model, not going to touch LinkedIn, too expensive, selling to B2B service providers, primarily marketing agencies, IT services, HR, and staffing firms. The persona is the owner, founder, or the upper management in marketing. Typically, I think paid social should be focused on generating engagement and awareness only, but would you still think about it like that if you were selling something that wasn't consultative or complex? Would you actually use Facebook for lead gen? So I don't know if that gives you enough to go on. We don't really get any other context, but
Yeah. So it's weird because halfway through the question, I was thinking I was going to go a certain way. Then for some reason, I kind of leaned a different way. And I'll just talk you through my thought process. Halfway through the question, he was like, it was Andy. So he was like, we're targeting people like marketing agencies and different things like that. If I personally am going after that type of buyer at that low cost, like, yes, you can test Facebook ads, direct response conversion. That's the only way the math is going to work there. You know, what low ACV, I'm thinking this is like what, $100 product, that we don't have enough context there, but the margins at that level are very difficult to make work through paid. And so I would encourage, especially like if you're selling a $1,500 one-time purchase product, like you might want to just go organic. And then from there you could figure out, like I would lean into a podcast and a LinkedIn strategy after I kind of tested on paid. The second one is it might be hard to target on Facebook and LinkedIn for that specific persona. And so there often are not times where I tell people not to run Facebook ads, but this one I'd like a little bit more context to be sure, but my initial reaction would be to not do it.
All right. Have another question from Peter that came in. If I'm marketing for a SaaS medical company, what channels or strategies are underutilized in this industry for outbound marketing? Go ahead and tear this idea apart, but I'm thinking about setting up 2 to 3 interviews with nurses, scientists in the industry, thinking they might be smaller than us, but they'll still share and give feedback and give us content that we could repurpose to position ourselves as the authority and reuse that content for cold email marketing. What do you think of this approach?
Mm-hmm. The first one that I just like, it's a old school definition that I just don't really believe in, is the idea of outbound marketing. I just believe, like, whether you are using advertising or sending an email or whatever, if it's just marketing. That's the way that I view it. And so that's beside the point. Now, the thought leadership type of thing, like interview some nurses and then use that in cold emails, is great. Like I do think that you would want to do that. When I was targeting healthcare, I was selling a recurring revenue model, disposable hardware product. And so it was, the business model was enough like SaaS for the same thing to play. That doing that was smart. Going out and interviewing the top 50, ER intensive or whatever it was, ICU intensivists at the top hospitals, and then putting out that video podcast and then sending it out to our 50,000 person email list database and getting whatever many people click through and watch the video, and people trickle down. And when you're selling a thing, it's like $50K a year minimum, all the way up to $250 million ARR type deals. Like that's a good play. I think that's part of the mix. The second thing that I'll add, and it'll be different than the last answer that I gave, is this is the perfect place for Facebook ads. You do not need any additional tech. You can literally say, I want to target nurses. And you know that you're going to get to the right people. Unlike if you were selling to marketing managers at software companies that are 100 to 250 employees, which you can't do on Facebook because you're not going to have that type of level of detail. You have, in medical, you have the gift of an industry specific job title. The persona is exactly who you're going after. And so I would do this. I would target, whoever they are, oncologist, respiratory therapist, by job title or field of study or professional association or all those different things. And that is the perfect use case for Facebook. I can consistently confused how no medical device companies do this. It's literally the perfect application for this. I proved it out in 2016. Literally, I've not seen one other company run that play, and it was so successful. And so that one really just blows my mind. It's more on the industry level than anything. It's how do I convince the CEO that instead of doing, sponsoring, the AA, American Association of Optometry trade show for $90,000 this year and put together something, that we should put that on Facebook. That's the battle that gets fought in those types of companies. But that one is pure play, organic thought leadership, whatever you want to do, video podcast, organic distribution, targeted Facebook page. Like that play is very clear cut.
I like it.
All right. Let's get someone on here. What do we got?
Yeah, there's another really big question that's interesting, but I don't think they're on. So do we have anyone here that has a question to hop on live? We can save the other one. I'm looking through.
There is. There's a lot of questions that are jokes in the chat. It's hard to tell.
Do SMEs ever have a nice long life? Are they all destined to be mismanaged martyrs? Hey, Jonathan, good to have you here.
Well, you can find one, and I can riff on this topic real quick. I think it'll be a quick one. You can find something, and then maybe it'll spark one or two more questions, and then we'll kind of get moving. And David's got one here. So the last thing that was on the agenda, I don't think that I'm going to go deep into this point, but I was walking my dog last night, and I was thinking about it, and I found it very interesting when you actually connect a lot of the things that I'm seeing together, which is that in the pursuit, when companies are pursuing so much efficiency, ROI measured to everything, overall effectiveness, specializations of roles, over time, you have created a system that is inherently not customer centric, not consumer centric. Predictable revenue, to be clear, is not customer centric. It is company centric. Companies that a lot of the ABM that's practiced today that we already talked about is 100% company centric, not customer centric. They don't even know who their customers are. I know that they put the data together in 6 Sense and they know the top 50 gold accounts, but they've never met one of them. All the marketers that are orchestrating it and putting the content together have never talked to one of them. And how is that customer centric? And so I challenge people a lot to think about those things, because we've completely lost the overall, I don't know if people want to think about it as fluffy things like emotional, buyer focused, doing the right thing, regardless if you get $1 back, are some things that I find very interesting. And it just says it's the narrative that predominantly MarTech vendors have put together, not only MarTech vendors, but a lot of stuff coming in from VCs and starting in predictable revenue and all these different things, have continued to push marketers in a place where they're boxed into a certain different thing. And so as marketers, we need to challenge that. And there are 100% ways to get it done. But I just wanted to get that point in there. Everyone can like reflect on that on their own. But I think, and I've had this happen to me before a lot of times where you like take a step back. Like I can think of one time in 2014 where I took a step back and I was like, everything that we're doing is 100% in our best interest, not at all. It's at the expense of our customer. And you know, sometimes if you're, you know, a manager level employee, you can't make any big changes, but I thought that I don't think that I've said it that way before. And I think that it was just maybe useful for some people to think about it that way. We got some questions.
Yeah, our good friend CVH, Chris, has
oh man, what's up?
The other Chris has a question.
What's up, Chris?
Bring him on.
What's up?
Good to see you, man. You got
There's
your
so many freaking Chris's here, so we gotta go CVH just to make it simple. Good to see you. Yes, I'm casual because it's like 5:30, man, so I'm not dressed up. So I got a fun question for you. So this is a new product to market within an old space like collections. It's the first of its kind. Company has been around for 2 years, publicly selling it for 6 months, ACV of 50 to 75,000. And they got one person in there who's not like no marketing background. How do you think about marketing 30, 60, 90 days into a new role?
Are you the one doing the marketing?
I'm going to be doing sales and marketing. So yes, I'm asking selfishly for myself.
So is the one person that you're talking about you? Cool. What are the constraints on this? You can't hire anyone, like you have, but what are the core constraints?
I'm not 100% sure. It's like, I would say can't hire anyone. Let's just say can't hire anyone for 6 months, but
Okay.
You have the ability to build out a tech stack. I wouldn't say you have a generous marketing budget by any means. Assume your tech stack right now is like Salesforce, no marketing automation, no buyer intent, no nothing.
This is beside the point, but like it would probably be helpful to even get like whatever the base package is. It does the marketing, you know, HubSpot integration with Salesforce. I think it's like $800 a month, but that's way beside the point. Not needed for the rest of the conversation. When you're in this situation, and you're doing this type of thing, I think it's the perfect opportunity for the core play of podcast LinkedIn. Like if you're in the role of being responsible for both sales and marketing and there's no one else on your team, like that is the core play, because your business development happens through the podcast and LinkedIn, and then you can do the selling. And then based on how you do the podcast, like if you structure the podcast in the right way, that you can get market research at the same time. Like I think about this a lot. And I actually did this last fall. If I really think about it, I didn't have a podcast. It wasn't on Apple, but I went to VPs of marketing and CMOs at companies that I was thinking about selling to, but I wasn't actively selling to. And I had them on my Zoom that was recorded, and I talked to them for an hour, and yes, it went up on YouTube and 7 people saw it, but it was more about what I learned from it. And then I knew them, and we created a couple of opportunities with them. We closed a deal 6 months later and those types of things. And so I do think that is the play of just pick a set of accounts that you don't intend to do outbound selling to, and then find your target buyer and then invite them on your podcast and then learn from them. And through that, maybe like at some point they, you know, not necessarily that they directly buy, but maybe they recommend you to someone, or you can ask them at the end, who, you know, is there someone else I, you know, saw you were blah, 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 connected with this person. Like, you think that they would want to come on the podcast? I'm like trying to really get this off the ground, or whatever your talk track is. And then put that, and then the expense that I would have is the post-production of the video. So don't do that yourself, pay someone to do that. And then publish the content and run the podcast, LinkedIn organic play. And then mix in whatever you think is the right thing to do on the sales side. But that be your primary, you don't do a lot of cold outbound. The LinkedIn stuff becomes the cold outbound over the next 60 to 90 days. So you can,
Awesome.
you literally get market research, content creation, business development, all in one in the first 90 days.
Cool. I appreciate it.
Right on, brother. Happy to help. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
You're already LinkedIn famous, CVH. So you got this. You got this.
Maybe so.
Right on, right on. That was a good one. I saw a couple other ones roll through here.
Yeah, Alex, at what point is a dedicated customer marketing function required on the CS team, if at all? I think that's interesting, and we might think about that differently, Chris.
I think it depends how you define it. Like I
was going to say, how do you define customer marketing?
A lot of people call it life cycle marketing too. But, and maybe we can get Alex on here, but like the way that I see that is I think that there's a lot of like roles that already exist in that a company of that size is thinking about the customer marketer that's already doing
Hey,
it.
So what you are looking at here is a summary report that's going to help.
All right. We got a little interruption there, but you know, at some point a product marketer could be doing that, could be doing customer marketing. The general marketing team could be doing that, but let's define it first to make sure that we're all doing it. So Alex, what do you think about like creating content for your customers to have them be more successful?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's more in line with like, it's a little bit of more product marketing in the sense where you're trying to show love to your actual daily users rather than perhaps the buyers of the software. In a B2B sense, typically not the same people. So I guess, yeah, at what point do you double down on just showing your users love, even though those users may churn out? They may be in an industry that's just, you know, they churn every 60 days. But you know that for the software to be successful, the users need to be bought in. So do you need to show them love through a marketing function?
I'm going to pass this to Megan first and then.
Yeah, so when I was at the one company that I was at where I was managing marketing, the marketing team worked both with prospects and with customers, right? And so I think a lot of the activities that we did for customers were around events, community, education or training on new feature releases to the product, focus groups, customer advisory boards. So I did have our marketing team own a lot of those initiatives. That said, almost across all of those that I just listed, huge collaboration with the CS leaders as well. And in many cases, we often found we were able to leverage a lot of those different things for both new customer acquisition and customer marketing, right? So we would put on an event for our customers, but we would let non-customers show up. We created our initial like Slack community for our customers, but it organically expanded over time to include non-customers. But you know, at the time, our persona was office managers, so other office managers that could get value. So maybe the way that I had structured it wasn't optimal, but it worked really well. So we had someone in charge of events, we had someone in charge of the community, we had someone in charge of, you know, where they weren't called a product marketer, but essentially doing that type of work. And we just made sure that they were balancing doing things for both. The company that I was at in particular very much was the land and expand model. We would acquire a customer with sort of one service, and there was just a ton of opportunity to increase their ARR. And so it was worth it to spend that time and that investment in nurturing that customer base. Because the more that they understood all of the different things that we could help them with, you know, the stickier we were, the bigger customer they became. So I'm not sure if that's the best practice, but it worked really, really well for us. And, you know, yeah, we even created a little podcast. We had our workshop events. And yeah, we had a great marketing team at Managed by Q. I don't know how you would think about that, Chris, if there's different angle from the marketing lens.
You know, I'm not sure people have heard this whole story, but like in 2013 to 2015, I come from places where it's full life cycle product management. And I think that is a foundational thing that gives me a huge edge against marketers that have come up through a very specialized function. Like the idea, whether doing full life cycle product management, where you are, you know, actively promoting downstream comms, working with the sales team, to sell the existing product, and meanwhile going out and talking to customers to figure out what feature or what new product that you need to build next, and then working that all the way through to launch, and then figuring out how to sunset the previous product if it's going to be a cross sell or upsell or a new feature. And like, that is a core foundation that almost no marketers especially in SaaS have. Now, because I have that like breadth of experience, I understand all of it. And I also understand a lot of the downsides to specialization that a lot of people don't see. Like I am against specialization when it's not 100% needed, because I think that it limits your visibility to the whole thing. And so I would split that out. Like the easiest way to split it for some company is upstream, downstream, right? Like almost every company does that already. And then you have product and marketing, and then product marketing kind of sits in the middle, but even product marketing, I think, leans a lot more downstream, and product management leans more upstream. And then you have this like downstream marketing role, which includes full life cycle management. And so I don't have a clear answer for this one, because I feel like most marketers should know how to do it. And I would challenge a lot of people that haven't. I don't think that you should change jobs and go and figure out how to, work with your engineering team to build a product. I am definitely not recommending that. But I would truly encourage you to figure out how, if you are in a very specialized role, how you elevate and understand more about either the function of marketing, or better yet, the business overall. We were saying let's like make sure that we get that on the agenda, because we have been talking about getting business acumen like on the table, and I can talk about ways like I could share a couple stories about like when this all started, but the couple of places where I learned this is like in 2014, I was like 24, 25, and I owned the P&L for an $8 million product line. Like I was responsible for that product delivering. And that was kind of like the setup. And so it was not, and these companies were profitable. So it wasn't just like, how would you grow top line? It was, how do we hit our profitability target? How do we hit our gross margin target? What are we going to do to get our COGS down? Those are some of the things that you think about. And during like shortly after that, I was like, wow, like if I know this, I can easily like buy, goods out of certain countries and import them and sell them on Amazon at, 3x markup or 5x markup. And then when you actually start to do that, so I would just especially for the young people in here, I would encourage you to start some type of little company like that, not to make $1 trillion, but you might, but to learn how to manage cash flow, learn how to put together a P&L in QuickBooks Online, know how to distinguish between cost of goods sold and fixed overhead, know how to take it. This is another one for personal people. Know how to take advantage of personal tax benefits. Like I was putting $10,000 extra in my pocket every month, because in my pocket every year from like tax write-offs, because I had a business and I was writing expenses off to that business while I was also getting a paycheck from the company that I worked for. And that is 100% allowed. And so there was a lot of different like learnings in there, which then when I got into the position of started to be in the venture funded companies as literally brought in as a marketing manager, and would go in and look at their P&L and be able to look at their marketing budget and understand when they're trying to get their gross margins up, why and how and why they want to do it that way, because that is one of the core drivers to how their valuation's calculated. And you just when you have that base of knowledge, and it's really not a lot, like it's really not hard to learn this initial stuff, but when you have that base of knowledge, it gives you the foundation to go out and kind of like, I don't know, playing detective is the wrong way to put it, but because I wasn't like fishing for anything, but being able to just kind of like look and draw your own conclusions based on what you see, I think is a foundational skill that everyone should have.
Definitely. I agree. Do you want to end with this interesting question that was written in?
I don't know what question you're talking about, but I'm happy to close out on one more. Yeah.
For that. It's I think this is interesting. So it's a European company. They are a traditional hardware company that is currently going through a digital transformation, and they're in the area of document and enterprise content management. So there's a lot of change management happening within the organization. And they are looking for ways to manage both their demand gen and their sales team. So they're saying the question is, should we be focusing our comms and our campaigns on demand gen while our local sales organizations focus on lead gen, or do we focus on brand while our local sales org is focusing on demand and lead gen? They're saying that they have a limited capacity to act on inbounds, and they're wondering how to balance sort of what their marketing team is doing versus their sales team is doing with brand, demand, and lead gen during this transformation. It's a complex one. Am I giving you
and there was a lot of terms thrown out there that, like, I'm just not sure what the person that was asking the question meant by any of those.
Yeah.
But in its most simplest form, your sales team should do sales and your marketing team should do marketing. And that is like, it's really the most simple form. And then you need to decide based on your business model and what's working right now, what type of marketing you should be doing. And then you have to decide for your sales team, is your sales team a full cycle rep? If so, they're going to have to do prospecting. If they're not full cycle, they're not going to need to. They probably should be doing it anyway, though. And that is just those are the most basic dynamics. The thing that I was thinking about as the question was being asked, and I think I've said this before, is that it's almost 2021. And if a company is just now going through digital transformation, that I don't want to work there. And so, like, that's my feeling. I know that's not helpful, or maybe it is helpful, to be honest, for whoever asked that question. But those types of things should have been made a decade. Those types of business model and technology and product changes should have been made a decade ago. And so it just speaks to the forthcoming challenges that will be happening over the next couple of years. And I would just rather get off that boat and hop on a different one.
Well, and I think what was interesting to me was I agree with you that they're a little late to the game, but if someone is going through that change management process, I wonder if there are like certain best practices to lean into. Like, shouldn't they be fully leaning into what that new digital product is going to be, moving away from the hardware stuff? I think it's the change management aspect is always really fascinating to me. And if you're given a choice, what choices are you making, knowing that you're in a less than ideal situation to make the best out of it?
Yeah, I would love
sparks.
I would love to see a stat. I'm sure that McKinsey or someone has put this together about. I would love to see the stat about what percentage of digital transformation projects are actually successful, that actually get to the end. Because I honestly don't think it's that many. Angelica's trying very hard to get Tom Goodwin on our podcast. Maybe at some point he will agree to join, but again, he's hard to get to. But like, these companies have a really difficult time making this exact change, because in order to move to a new business model, you must abandon the old one.
Yeah.
And in order to abandon the old one, you feel a short-term business pain, which is typically lower profitability or potentially completely going out of business. And so the only other path is to have both of them running at the same time, but companies will not put the resources required to have them both running at the same time for the digital product to overtake the other product, where then they can actually make the move, because it's either 100% not feasible based on their P&L, or they don't want to take the short-term hit on profit. So they try and do both of those things at once. And what happens is, like, you end up like some of the companies that have really lost. Like, I don't want to throw out any names here, but like, Blockbuster didn't buy Netflix because they were good with what they were doing right now, and they were probably making 90% margins or whatever on the DVDs. And those types of things will continue to happen. You just don't hear about them, as there's not many that are that dramatic, but that will happen to a lot of different companies. And so that's the reason that I don't like being on that train, is because go and find a company that's digitally native and go and do those things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that more companies than we realize are in that situation. So
Especially right now, they're getting forced to do it.
Yeah, that was an interesting question. And I think very few are willing to just rip the Band-Aid off and lean into the new thing. I think people straddle both sides and do nothing right.
So, all right, everyone. Well, not a record tonight, which I'm perfectly okay with. To be honest, this is my third podcast today. I did one right before here, so like I'm cool if we don't go for 2 hours this time. But last week was fun. It was the longest one we've ever done. I thought that was cool. Appreciate seeing a couple of people that have been on here, but I haven't seen in a couple weeks. Appreciate a couple people that are here all the time. Also appreciate the couple people that sent me DMs recently that were like, I've gotten all of the things that I wanted to get out of this podcast, and now I'm going to go execute. That is fantastic. That's fantastic. And come back here every couple, months, or listen to the podcast every once in a while, because I think there's always going to be little nuances, but yes, like at some point the people here will get everything that they need you'll have all the information that you need to go out and do it yourself. And what's fascinating when you actually go and take that jump, because you're going to be on live, and hopefully one day maybe I show up because you have figured out something new. And so, anyway, just wanted to say, really appreciate you all. Tuesday night is always my favorite night of the week, even more so than Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So, really like being here with all of you, and really hope to see you again next week.
Have a good week, everyone.
See ya.